calves and also our extenders. And I always like to set the tone of kind of why we did this as a company. We, are normally in biologics in the uh, hay industry and also the crop. And naturally, as we started to develop our hay fertility systems, we stepped right into the extenders. And then, of course, we needed the mineral packs that were really formulated for people that were using grass finish pastures, things like that. So we have really made a complete system again for the hay industry, and that's what tonight's going to be about. I think a lot of times it's very hard, and I tell people when you think about hay, it's probably one of the most neglected. Your pastures many times are the most neglected on the farm because it doesn't have the emphasis as the crop side does. So a lot of times when we meet farmers, we're dealing with things that are way behind. We heard guys over the weekend at shows saying they haven't done anything to their pastures and hay ground for 20 years. And so, these are things we want to look at. I think really understanding what is your end game, what are you trying to accomplish, whether it's a feeding program, whether it's cash sales with your hay programs, whatever that is, that's where you know our salesman like Joel will help you to really formulate that plan to get to where you need to be. One thing I will tell people, the extenders were really brought about by us understanding when we brought our first calves in, um, using our hay program. We developed the backgrounding first. Our goal was to be able to treat our hay as we're baling it. We would treat it, bale it up, and then help with weaning of calves and then growing the calves and getting them to the 800 pounds probably was our goal, and really putting a structure behind them calves to get them there. And so we did that. And so one thing that we learned, we were feeding right about 250 head, represented about 40 different farms. These were cell barn calves, so they're very high risk calves. And so as we fed them, our ultimate goal was to get them up, get the frame behind them so that we could put the meat on them and finish them off. Now we didn't have the fattening yet, and so we did that. And so we got them up to 758 weights. And so one thing we realized is we still hadn't put the gain on them, that really made it profitable. Now, one thing Buddy had talked to me about is we had put about 18 inches of frame on them, but yet that was just taking, I always say, a short fat kid and turn him into a tall skinny kid. We yet hadn't done the hard work of really putting the meat on them that would pay the bills. It was great for backgrounding, it was great for respiratory, it was great for not having to treat, but it didn't move the needle enough financially to justify that program. So again, you have to know your program. If all you're trying to do is background calves, we have that program. If you're trying to finish the animals, we have that program. If you're trying to, drive energy for mama cows to wean heavier calves, we have that program. So again, I always talk about that, with our extenders, with our hay program. And I think one thing that's very important that I think is when you use our benefit hay program, we always think about consolidating nutrients, having better grass, having higher proteins in the hay before you even use our extenders. So again, we try to look at this as a complete system that someone that uses this and follows it is going to meet the goals of their success of what they're looking for. So again, um, all farm sales, a lot of times education wise, I think it's very usual for farmers. They really don't test very well their hay. They have an average. They think it runs about 8% protein or 10% protein. but they really don't get into relative feed values and protein contents and the different minerals because most people during the winter they buy hay. And so they always ask you what size of bale is it? How heavy is it? I don't know if we can lift it on our farm, but we never really had these in-depth discussions. And so I think why is that important? Because, just like our name energy curve, each one of these animals are going to have an energy curve or a hormonal switch to get to the next growth stage. So I think using our hay, these are the things when you start thinking about selling hay, is to drive that value to your buyers to know that this hay is not just a typical hay. Now, one thing I think also is very important, the program was really developed around marginal grass. So we have a lot of fescue here in Missouri, and that gets docked at sale barns. We get docked when we ship cattle to other states. They talk about fescue foot. A lot of times in the horse industry, they talk about fescue bag, where the moms are not producing milk for the foals. So all of these are things that we took, knowing that 80% of our grass was probably going to be fescue, and we wanted to develop a program that we didn't have to go to a farmer, tell them you got to rip up your pastures, you got to plant new seed, but to develop a system that they could get into using our chemistries and not have to have a big capital, output to change their whole farming operation. So again, in your commercial buyers, they're going to be very looking at, the value sensitive. They want to know the quality side of it, larger quantities, timing. And your smaller buyers on your farms are going to be really more price sensitive. Last year during the drought, we saw prices in hay, you know, really hit some record amounts, and I don't know if it was any better quality hay that were sold on farms, but the desperation of needing hay, people had to pay that price. But so for our farms, we feel like no matter if the markets are demanding or not, we are producing a hay that's worth a certain amount of money, and so we stick to that quite often on what we do. So some of the things you want to look at that I think Benefit Hay program really takes that we've looked at is your different plant species, um, whether you're doing a monocrop or a multi-species mixture. We also look at legumes versus grasses, cool season versus warm season. So again, Benefit Hay is developed to feed cool and warm season blends of grass in your pastures or hay fields. We look at legumes. I actually do a soybean. This year we did a soybean teff and a soybean sorghum blend for hay. Soybean plants been in the legume family, so it just makes sense. It's a lot easier crop to raise. We don't have the disease pressure like we do a lot of times in our alfalfa fields. So, and we can produce 14, 16 tons an acre using that. Now, a lot of guys in that discussion will say, "Yeah, but I've only got to plant alfalfa one time." And it grows 3 to 5 years, and you've got to replant soybeans every year. Well, for me, I look at it a little differently. Is that even in the cost of the seed itself, it's very important compared to what we're paying today for alfalfa. We can plant still cheaper if we planted every year for 5 years. Then a lot of times the input cost is on the first one. So again, we look at production when we think about your program that you're working on. We look at so we take a deep dive into when you're actually harvesting your hays. What is the growth stage? What is the optimum protein content? We have a lot of research that we've done internally of when is the best time to cut different types of grasses to get the condensed nutritional factor of that hay. So we really we the Benefit Hay program is something that we do every day with our mama cows, our feed operation, our hay operation, and we treat it like a crop. We don't, even though we're not a huge hay operation, we still want every bale going out to be optimum for the highest quality so that our customers, they recognize the difference in our hay operation, and that helps us to move forward. Um, I think things that are very important. A lot of times people see our farms, we will harvest about 4,000 bales this year. We do a lot of wrapped hay, even though we do a little bit of dry hay. We will do a wrapped hay that runs about 20-25% moisture content. We do that because we grow so much hay that we want to protect it as long as we can be in wraps. So there's a lot of times in our feed operations, we could be feeding hay that's over 2.5 years old, but we have not lost any of the quality and the proteins or relative feed values that as we did when we first baled it. So that's just what we have learned that helps us to stay meets the needs of our farm. But we have a lot of customers that do dry bale, and so I think it's very important to recognize that. And one thing we want to always keep in mind about our hay operations is temperatures, the moisture content, sunlight, lengths of days, all of these things. So that's why I think you see a lot of times in the hay operations where they tell someone it's first cutting, second cutting, third cutting, because all of these are going to represent different weather patterns, different moisture contents, and the stress factors of them grasses and when they go through it. So I think it's really important that when we're not just people that sell chemistries and fertility programs, but we are people that really have farmers that have really taken a look at this to figure out how do we make the most money for what we do. So our program is really developed around four different products. So one thing people say about me when we look at development of products, I try to really think through the whole system. So we're not just trying to sell you fertility, but we also want to look at your biodiversity of your soils, the nutrients, uh, weed pressure, insect pressure, things like that. That from just when you think about hay fields and the thatch, that's where your disease pressure is going to come from. When you think about the insect pressure and the things that can live there in that thatch, that's where you're going to start to struggle in a hay field or your pastures. So the first product that we always start with, it's applied in the fall, is a product called Digest. So Digest is really formulated to be able to be sprayed onto a hay field, onto a pasture, and that's going to break down all the thatch that's been left over for the season. Now, in that, we're going to introduce about 7,000 species of microbes and different fungus things into the soil. And from there, we're going to start to break down that biomass or that thatch that's left over, and that we're going to start creating nutrients that'll be available for the next growing season. So we're in the process. We have it for our crops. We have a calculator that shows exactly what that value is, and we're getting ready to release our hay version of that we can show people that by using that to break down your leftover thatch and things like that, you're getting rid of your disease, your insect pressure, and also you're developing nutrients for the next season. And so when you look at our pricing on that per acre, we always have a positive cash flow of what it can do as in nutrients that are available for the next season. So from there, whether you plant your crop, whether it's cover crops, whether it's you're coming in and planting your hay season, or it's an established hay field, the first application would be hay or benefit hay, and that would be at green up. And so you can kind of see the picture there at the sprayer. That was at green up last year, and we're starting to feed the plant to get it up and out the ground as fast as we can for healthy production. And then in about 2 weeks, you would do a second application of benefit hay. And what that is just to bring it to the right growth stage and right usually at flag leaf before it starts to head out. is when your nutrients are at optimum, because you have to think through that plant. It's just like corn or soybeans. As that plant switches or that grass switches over to set the head, then all of the energy and nutrients flow into that head to make the seed. So we want to be able to make sure that we can harvest that hay at the optimum nutrients and get it out there. So from there, this is where a lot of people, I think, struggle with us a little bit. Is, when I tell them we do 14 tons an acre, they say, "Holy mackerel, how do you do that? What's the deal?" Well, here's one of our secret sauce here is after we harvest, we treat every harvest that we do and we feed the plants to get it to the most optimum harvest, or a second cutting or a third cutting, and sometimes fourth cutting for us. Now we're located in Missouri, and I would say for years we did one cutting. And now we're up to doing 3 to 4 cuttings depending on what field and what crop it is per year. And so we treat every cutting, and we start feeding the grass again for another cutting. And then once you harvest that, you would have 2 or more applications of hay, and then you would harvest it. And so we always tell people, if you're doing one cutting today, then use our products that way. Don't think, well, I want to get to 3, so I want to buy 3. Start with 2 cuttings, and then and 2 applications, I mean, and then as you see the need, and you start to see the development of grasses after you, then you can always fulfill that. So if Joel is really good, our team's really good at working with you to set kind of the rules here in that. So whatever you do, whatever you figure out, however many harvests you're going to do, how many applications, we'll work with you through that. Is I always tell people this: the basics of our hay program is going to be digest and benefit hay. And you don't have to use the extenders to get the yield that we're talking about. So I always talk that the digest and the hay are for yield. That's for production in the field. Them are the 2 products that we all need as farmers, and that's yield and production. And the next 2 products that we talk about is, and we call them extenders, is what we call for a purpose. So if I'm going to be backgrounding 100 of our calves, then I can take a field. Now think about this with me. It kind of gets a little confusing, but let's say we have a 100-acre field, and we know we're going to do backgrounding first. Then we can treat the first baling with backgrounding. And what backgrounding will do, it's actually going to it's going to be used biomimicry to increase the protein, to increase the relative feed value of that grass. And then maybe the second cutting I will use fattening on, and that's energy. And so Buddy, who runs our hay operation, he has that all strategized throughout the year of how many backgrounding bales do I need in our operation and how many fattening, and then he will pick, what am I using in this. Now that sounds confusing. It sounds like a lot more work, but it's when you think about that products of the extenders, they both have the same application rate. One is used for energy and one's used for protein. And all of our customers that have used this in that testing, we have a lot of research in that. Is there's 2 things I want to make sure you understand. This is not a product that you can use for pre-baled grass that you want to unroll and then spray it. That's not how it was designed to be used. It was designed to be where you spray the windrow right before you bale it, and then let it set for about 10 weeks. And in that 10 weeks, the microbes are working. It's breaking down the long chain proteins in the hay. It makes it more palatable. And you'll also have a really strong kind of a silage sweet smell to it. And so it'll be ready after about 10 weeks, and then you can start feeding it. You'll start to see a lot more improvements in the quality of the hay, uh, all of your nutrient readouts that you'll get back should increase. And so that's the different. One is protein, one is fattening. If you're only backgrounding calves at your operation, all you would need is backgrounding. If you have mama cows and you're going to wean the calves and sell them, you could get by probably with just using fattening for the mamas, because that's going to increase milk production, heavier weaning calves. And so I think one thing you'll appreciate about us is not only do we look at what our products do, but we look at the health of the animal, the increased, fat in the milk for the mamas, heavier weaning weights, and so we look at a holistic approach because we use this every day in our operation. And if it doesn't work for us to make us profitable, and so all of these products were really brought off the farm from us using it, and really have brought them to the market that way. So again, if you think about relative feed value of that hay and how we're going to increase it, um, things that are really important. If you think of how most commercial feedlots look at this, you really want to take that same approach. If it's important for a 10,000 head feedlot to do this, it's important for your 50 head feedlot to do this. So again, digestibility, fiber bulk, utilizing estimates of dry matter intake. And so all of this is important. So if you're not familiar with this type of approach, I would encourage you, go online, and there's a lot of universities that put out, like, what does it take to put 2 pounds on a large frame steer? Uh, what type of feed? What do I need nutritionally to do that? And then that will show you your break even. That'll show you exactly what you need to do that. And I would encourage you to do that. Follow the science of feeding cattle instead of always looking for whatever's the cheapest. So hit the target scientifically. So again, a cow has three energy curves. It's net energy maintained, which means that's where they're going to live. That's how they survive. And then as they, make a hormonal switch to net energy gain, that's how they start making production, meat, muscle, and from there is lactation. So if you have a heifer that is converting over to be a mom, she's bred, and she has to hormonally make that switch for lactation so that she'll produce milk. So you hear stories like, well, we have 25% non-breed backs on our mom cows. That's nutrition most of the time. The other one is we had heifers that didn't produce milk. Most of the time that's nutrition. So as you look at that, when you're testing your feed, you'll start to see where you'll have your breed backs. You'll start to see that you'll have higher weaned calves, higher production. And so these are things that you really want to follow. Don't just be chasing, well, the local cooperative's got cheap feed and I can raise some calves. I will tell you, follow the science behind it, get into that groove. And the reason why we went down the path with hay is because you already have that. If you're in the hay operation or pastures, these are the things we want to use first because they're already available to you. And so we look at these things as low cost of capital input to make this happen. So again, we talked a lot about this, but the extenders, and I'll touch on them again, the extenders are really used to target the feeding purpose for the nutrient, again, backgrounding and fattening, and also the hay preservatives that will help preserve that. Like again, we've fed hay that's up to 2.5 years old, but yet with the still nutrient as if we hired the same color. Um, Now, one thing I want you to understand about this too, I think it's really important, is like for us, when we unwrapped the first bale, there was a white kind of a yogurt, looked like mold over the bale. And I was like, oh, Ben, this is not going to work. I mean, I mean, who's going to feed this? And he kept telling me, he said, Todd, just feed it. And I said, I don't know. So I threw it over the feed lot, but I didn't put it in the feeder because I thought, well, I don't want to dig it back out if they're not going to eat it. So I threw it over. In about 10, 15 minutes. All these calves come running up and they started eating this. So Ben called me back. He said, Todd, that's our probiotics. These are things that are in that bill to help for rumen development. These are going to help these calves not have that respiratory issue because calves know how to eat grass. So again, these are things that we have thought through why we don't develop products to be able to go to market to brag that our product has this. We go to market because we know that we needed it in our feed operation to be successful, and that's why we brought it forward. So again, it's going to increase your nutrients. It also extends the hay. One thing Ben always says, hay extenders improve the nutrient quality of a bale of hay through the use of microbes and nutrient additives. So that's straight out of the horse's mouth as our chief formulator, that these are things that when I used to do hay, when I did all this, no one really talked about. And so I think this is our approach, that when we look at this, we want the optimum health for these calves, because we know if the mom is healthy, our bulls are healthy, our calves are healthy, we're going to have a lot less treatment of sickness within our feed operation. So one thing I will tell you, if you've done this, you understand this. Once you start treating an animal for respiratory, they can become chronic, and once you give them one shot, then the national estimate is once you give them a shot of Resiflor or one of those, it's about $80. And so when you think about, in our days of feeding that we make $150, $200 a head profit, well, it gets eaten up pretty quick by treating them for respiratory and BRD and things like that. So I think it's very important. We've worked very hard to make sure that no matter whose farm it's on, no matter where it's at, that people can use our products, and we start to see better herd health, better animals, better higher weaning weights, better breed backs, and overall just hay quality goes up. So if they are selling some of their hay, if they don't need it, then we also have that covered too for them. So again, very palatable feed, and really when we think about the return on investment, when you think about, and we have kind of a saying here, we believe if it's better for you to give us $1 than keep it, that's how you know our product is worth it. And we believe that. We work very hard to know when you hand us $1, it is a good thing for you with our products for the future. So again, a lot of times people ask is like, holy mackerel, you guys even developed cattle tubs. And the reason is because we did not see in the marketplace really a formulated tub that really helped on the grass and the hay industry, and really met the need. So one thing that we see with our customers, and we hear this time and time again, is we work very hard in the consumption. So we advertise with our tubs, the calves will eat, or the mamas will eat about 0.25 to half a pounds a day. And we hear that consistently from our customers, that that's spot on. Now, in our confinement indoor feed facility, we actually have our tubs indoors, right in the pen. So you would think that consumption would be through the roof, but what we see, it's the same consumption that we see on our mama cows or the calves that are in the field. Even in confinement, they're still under the same consumption. And it's not salt. So we just don't load the tub up with salt for that limiter, but we've actually formulated internally, it's part of our IP, to make sure that these calves are being fed correctly, but it has a self limiter that's all natural. If you buy our fly tubs, if you bought just our normal background and finishing tubs, they would be an all natural tub. But once you step into fly control, we don't make the fly control ourselves, and we feel like one of the best fly control in the industry. And our approach to fly control is this: if you look at the seasonality of flies, they can be 1 to 40 days, depending on the different characteristic or species of that fly. So a lot of times we get asked on our fly deal that guys or people see flies and they put fly tubs out. You have to understand the principle. In every manure pile, there can be 10,000 larvae. So if you're 50 days in and you're just now setting a fly tub out, you're already you're too late. And will we help in the future? You bet. But will it go out the next day and you won't see flies? No. So I tell people, and it's not us, it's just the science of even fly control. If you're going to do it, you need to start early in the season, about 40 days before you would naturally start to see flies, a part of your cow operation. So we start ours in February. Even when it's cold, we'll start putting them out because we want to get that in the cow system. We want to get them prepared because we all know it. In 3 days, the temperature and the weather could be different. Now we're starting to see flies, and as it rains, they start to hatch out of the manure. So these are some of the principles that our team will work with you on, is getting them in place. Um, and one thing I'll say this to everybody is we are willing to work with any farmer no matter where you're at. So if you want to deal with tubs, we're not a high pressure people to say, well, you got to have our hay operation to do the tubs, or vice versa. If you're just wanting to do production in hay, we'll work with you on that. You don't have to, I call it the full tilt boogie. You don't have to do everything. And we feel like through our trust, you'll start to grow with us. You'll start to use the extenders, and then the next thing you know, you'll start to see value there, and then you'll want to start talking about tubs with us, because we're okay with gaining your trust as we grow the business and grow with you. So from there, these are some of the test results we've got back from some of our customers. They've sent us back to us. There's a little bit of a funny story on this one. But an untreated bale, you can see the difference in protein and relative feed value increase on this. And these are real numbers and it's real results. So again, if you go back to what is needed to do what you're trying to accomplish, if it's heifers, if it's small frame, it's large frame, you're trying to get 2.5 pound daily gain, you have to meet certain requirements. And these are the things we want to see. So again, in fattening, look at the relative feed value, the protein content. We're not looking for protein, we're looking for energy. So this is where you start to see the quality. Um, and again, I always tell people we use a lot of times marginal grass, and in the past we've supplied to different safaris for different animals. And one thing the vet said to us, they've ate as much on your hay in a day as they have 2 months on the old hay. Now, you know, first thing farmers think, well, I can't afford that. But the truth of it is the animals were eating it because they needed something. And as they learned it was there, they started to back off of it. And then they got their consumption rate down. When I think about how we look at finishing or our cattle, we try to shoot for about 12 pounds of hay to 1 pound gain. And with that, because of the hay, we don't have high dollar grasses. We're right about 6 cents a pound on our hay operation. So we can go into a ration and it has everything needed. They know how to eat grass. We have a video that we show people a lot of times when we wean our calves. Um, so when the moms are out during the winter, we'll be feeding our fattening bales to them, right? So that's energy. They're getting ready to drop calves. Now they got a bag. They're producing milk. They're raising these calves. It's cold and they're having to walk for water, but the hay in front of them has a lot of energy to it. And so when it's time to wean the calves, we'll go out, we'll gather up the calves, we'll bring them into the feedlot, and we have a video that we unloaded. Gosh, it was probably right about 180 calves. And I would say within 30 minutes from unloading till the very last calf in the pen, they were all up at the feed bunks eating. And so when you think about that, anytime a calf will go straight to a bunk and start eating, then you've cut your whole uh, pressure down of respiratory, where they start to ball. Most of our calves, when they come into our feed lot, the ball's gone within a day, day and a half. Um, and I give it all. I give the that to our extenders because the smell of protein and the fattening is the same. So if a calf's out eating fattening out in the field and he comes into our feed facility, then all he knows what this is. He knows it's food. He knows he can go up and start eating it. He's been eating it with his mom. And so they eat and they go lay down. And what we'll see the next day, they'll cycle, they'll go, and we actually monitor this in our pens of how much time they spend and where do they move to. So if they go to the waters, they'll usually get something to eat, go to the waters, go by the tubs, and then they'll go lay down. Couple hours, they'll get up, they might go over to the tubs, they might go over to the feed, they'll get a drink, go lay down. And these calves will kind of do this within the confinement all day long. And we have a lot more space probably than most confinement for our calves. And so we love to look into the feed facility and they're all sitting in there chewing their cud. There's no bawling, there's no walking the fences, and they're just sitting there content. And anytime you can get that going, then it's meat, it's production, it's revenue, and you really can take this to a new place. Now, a lot of times people ask about how do we marble like if I feed grain. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, I owned a company called IntelliFarms, and we helped thousands of farmers nationwide and even globally manage grain to get the optimum price at the end user. So I'm not against grain. I'm not against guys using grain. I tell people all I want to be is perceived as good as people that do grain, but I don't have the capabilities of feeding grain in my area because I don't have the equipment to raise grain. So um, right now prices are down. So yes, I could go out and figure out a way to buy grain, but the pressure of it is we never know the volatility of the grain industry and what does that mean. So I'm using things I already have, right? I'm using the pastures, the hay fields that I already have, and I'm making them optimum use so I can extend. So when you think about marbling, here is how we really took the approach, and it's called biomimicry. So we took like a kernel of corn or in all the different grains that we could do the research on, and we would see how much oil, how much carbohydrates, how much starch, and then with natural products, we just mimic that to be able to be sprayed onto the hay so that when the cow's eating it, he's getting the same amount of carbohydrates, starches, proteins, whatever is needed as if you were feeding grain. And because of that, the cows, react, in the same way, in the same marbling as if you were eating grain. Now, with that said, we run Red Angus. We have Joel raises cows with us. We have some DeBrucker Charolais, and we do a lot of crosses. We do a lot of prairie fires and smokies, and we raise heck of calves. I would say the last 2 years locally, we've topped the market with our cattle production. And I'm not bragging. It's been a lot of hard work getting this to a place. But at the end of the day, I have sons that are coming up. I have family that will depend on the farm. And at the end of the day, for me, it's the legacy of being able to produce a superior product at a third the price. And if we're putting the pounds on calves at a third the price, then we have markets that we can do a lot of other things. We can take it direct to consumer. If we have to haul them a little farther, if we have to take them to better markets, we can. And all of that starts with what I feel like with the work we've done with our fertility systems and our extenders. So that's why we do it. And uh, gosh, at the beginning of this year, and we've been doing this 8 years now with the products, we released them 4 years ago. But on our farm, we've been doing this, well, I guess it's 9 years this year. And at the beginning of the year, I said, you know what? I'm tired of doing this. I'm ready to get acres. I'm ready to grow this thing. And so we have really put an aggressive program out there for producers. Um, and one thing I want you to think about, uh, in the easiest way, and I try to keep it as simple as I can. If you're maintaining your pastures, you're going to be with one application and digester, you're going to be running about 20-25 bucks an acre. If you're doing a hay program with two applications of hay and digester, you're running about 30. If you're on crops, you're running about 45 bucks an acre, and that's quick germ all the way to digester. So it's the complete system, and we have a great return on that. So that's right now is some of your best buying times with early, booking discounts, things like that. So I wanted to throw that out there and just let you be aware of it. And if you're interested, let us know, because we'd love to see you get the digester on this fall and really be set up and ready to go for next year. So um, I know there's a lot of questions on how do you, so our fertility systems, we use a self-propelled sprayer, but we have people that use boomless sprayers, ATVs, pull behind sprayers, and you will apply the benefit hay at 1 gallon an acre. So I always ask people, what is your minimum gallons on your sprayer? And most of them are 10 to 20 gallons an acre, an acre. So if it is 10, you would put 1 gallon of benefit hay and 9 gallons of water, and then spray that per acre. So your 10 gallons would be sprayed on an acre, and that would be a gallon of hay. Uh, Digester goes on at 1 gallon per acre, and the extenders don't go on that heavy. So when you're spraying the windrow, they go on. We try to tell people to do 1 ounce of the extender per 100 pounds of hay. So, after the first bale, um, if it's 1,000 pound bale, you're going to have about 10 ounces of our extenders on there. And that will cost you about $1.50 per bale. And so when you think about the cost and what we're doing and raising, it's has an incredible return on investment based upon, protein is traded on the Chicago Board of Trade every day, and it's probably one of the most expensive things that farmers buy is protein. And for that conversion rate and what we're able to do and increase, it has an incredible return on investment for that. So with the extenders, we have a Femco sprayer that's on our baler. It goes down, it sprays the windrow, and you can't put too much. So as you're figuring this out, if you put 2 ounces on it, beneficially, it's not going to really help you anymore, but it's not going to hurt anything either. So it's hard because a lot of our equipment here in the United States are not set up to do any type of inoculation on balers. So do it that way. We have some farmers that they drive down with their four-wheeler, spray their windrow with a hand sprayer just to get it on there before they bale it. Listen, I feel like farmers are pretty creative and they figure it out. But just know that none of these products are developed that if a little bit's good, a lot's got to be better. None of these products are developed that way. When we tell you to put a gallon, try to be at a gallon an acre. If we tell you an ounce per 100 pounds of hay, try to get it there. And there's apps you can put on your phone that shows you exactly how much you're putting per acre based upon speed, tips, things like that. So try to follow that as best you can, because it's not going to make you any more money by putting too much on there. So the extenders go on that direction, and the hay products go on just at a gallon per acre with your sprayers. So I don't have any more questions. I'll open it up this time. If anybody else has any questions or anything that we want to talk about. I know some people dropped off. They warned us they were driving and they might lose us. So I think we've lost some on here. So does anybody have any questions at this time? Okay. Well, and you might be muted. If you're talking to me, you might be muted. It looks like everybody's muted right now. So if you do have a question, just unmute yourself, and I'll do my best to try to answer your question. Um, One thing we do offer in one of our programs, I'll mention to you. We're farmers. We know cash is tight right now, and if you do a quote with us, and let's say your quote is $4,000, you're doing 100 acres of crops, and your quote is 4,000. If and I'm as flexible because I understand cash flow. I tell guys, if you want to pay me half now, I'll ship you the digester so you can get it on this fall. And then you tell me when you think you'll be ready, whether it's January, February, March, whatever, for the balance of it, and then you would just pay us before we ship it. The reason I do it, I'm a farmer. My granddad was a dairyman, and we've got to get through this. So if you're not successful as our customers, we're not going to be successful. So we're just trying to do our best to work with all of our customers to make this we recognize 47% of the revenue has been taken out of the grain industry. And so we want to help you get through this. And what we really want is all of your acres as you build trust in us, and you start to see that we do what we say, and in that we can get more acres ourselves. So with that said, I don't want to keep babbling. We're a little bit early tonight, which is unusual for us because we like to talk. But this is something simple. If you're interested in our cattle tubs, one thing I didn't talk about, the pricing on our standard fattening and background tubs. They're 179. If you add fly control, they're like 219. Um, we do have incentives on pallet quantities and shipping discounts, and again, we try to work with you as best we can to get our products on your farms. And we're starting to do a lot of trade shows. We're working with Missouri Cattlemen as much as we can this year to get our products out with them this year. So again, I appreciate you showing up tonight and taking the time to meet with us tonight. I know time's important too. And so we just really would love to earn your business and work with you to help, get your herds where you need to, your hay business or your crops to where you need them to be. So with that said, if there's no questions, we'll let everybody go tonight, and we appreciate you joining us tonight. Okay. Well, I'm going to let everybody go, and you guys have a great night tonight. Thank you.